Hello, chess geniuses. Today we're looking at a game that a viewer sent in that shows not one, not two, and not even three, but four brilliant moves that he found in this majestic game. And I have to say, at first, I was a little bit skeptical about this game because the sequence seemed so good that I couldn't believe a 1100 almost rated player could find this. But then I talked to the viewer. He walked me through his thought process and some other moments in the game led me to believe that this was a genuine game that he played and that allowed him to enter the so-called God mode or Grandmaster mode for a few moves in a row. So sit back and let's enjoy the game from Charitharda. I hope that's how you pronounce that username. So the opponent starts with e4, and our hero decides to play the Perks defense. Now, I didn't ask him whether this was his go-to opening or anything. This is a fine system. Maybe not the strongest one or anything, but something that you can play. And so far, we're playing pretty standard development. The engine gives this an inaccuracy. It would probably prefer something that controls some more of the center or develops more pieces, but the idea is to bring this bishop to the fianchetto. I don't hate that. As long as we're fighting for the center in some form and developing the pieces, that should be pretty good. And now the opponent castles. The player Charitharda goes bishop e7. And now some more standard moves. Now he goes for this double fianchetto setup, which is something interesting. I suppose once the bishop is going to be on the fianchetto, it's going to be pretty hard for white to develop his bishop without blundering this pawn on b2, because the dark square bishop would pick that up. Now, he does develop the bishop, and he does go bishop to g7. The opponent sees that, being a over 1000 rated player, and blocks the attack of the bishop with the pawn. Now, Charitharda decides to take the full center like this. This is good. And we develop the knight. And now we have this very weird move by Bobby5483. I'm just going to call him Bobby from now on. He decides to go back with the knight. And it doesn't seem like there's a clear reason why. I suppose he might want to push this pawn in the center and start a kingside attack, like maybe even a full pawn storm, and point with these bishops down and then bring the knight back eventually. Now, what should white do here? Well, my guess is that the engine wants something like just a standard developing move. So bringing this knight out, maybe even through here and back. You need to develop your pieces before you start an attack. Otherwise, when the time comes, this knight is still going to be asleep inside the castle. But okay. Now, Charitharda just develops the queen. White follows. And now Charitharda is the first one to actually hit in the center with this f5 move. Very good, very aggressive. And we shouldn't be worried about the king side opening, because the king can always find shelter on the queen side by long castles. Okay, now this move aims at trading off this bishop, and Charitharda decides to go back. Slightly better would have been to take this, and after the queen takes, well, we can probably just castle long here, and we're going to bring the rooks and start an attack on the king side, because we're the first ones to have played f5. Now we are approaching the territory where we're going to see some brilliant moves here. Now, black decides to take. Sorry, white. Black takes back with the rook. And white takes this pawn. Now, the reason why the engine is liking this position for black quite a lot is the fact that this capture actually advantages black, because the knight is going to be able to jump in. The queen is going to be open looking at the king side. This rook is going to be open looking at the king side. The bishop is already looking at the king. So we can start smell the possibility for some tactics, some attacks. Now, for some reasons that I cannot fully explain, Charitharda decides to castle rather than recapturing the pawn. And I suppose he wanted this. He wanted to recapture like this, sacrifice a pawn to open up the king side even further, which you will see actually works out pretty well in just a little bit. Now, what is interesting is that technically we could say that this move was a blunder. Well, clearly you can see the evaluation, so it wasn't really a blunder, but it seems like white can just pin the queen to the king. And white is just going to lose the queen, right? You cannot move it away, because otherwise you're going to blunder your king. And there's nothing that can block, except this rook. And now, it is technically the only move in the position, but the engine gives this a brilliant move, the first of 4. Don't worry, the next brilliant moves are going to be much less underwhelming. As a matter of fact, they're going to be quite spectacular. But nonetheless, this is our first brilliant move here. Of course, it's better to lose a rook rather than to lose an entire queen. And this is what happens in the game. And now the opponent plays knight a3, finally realizing, oh, this knight never came out. I might as well develop it now. But it is a little bit too late. This knight is very passive. The knight here is passive. Knights on the rim are dim. The rooks are not doing much. And we talked about this very strong pressure on the king. All of these pieces are going to be able to participate in an attack very easily. So we have knight f4, bringing the knight closer. Very good move. And d4 by white. Rook g8, again, bringing more pieces into the attack. And you can see how black is starting to squeeze tighter this position. It's starting to get closer to this king. Now, both this capture and or this capture are threats. Because, of course, if black comes here, this pawn cannot recapture because of the pin. So the king will have to move. But, of course, even better would be to, well, actually, maybe, yeah, I suppose taking like this. I was thinking that even the knight could take and then set up a discovery attack. But yeah, the engine says that this is a miss, I suppose, because the king can move. Okay. But instead, in the game, white decided to play knight g4. A very sensible move. Because this, of course, blocks the view of the rook. Of course, you might say, well, we can just decide to push this pawn, right? And make the knight move. But actually, after h5, white can just play f3, sacrifice the knight, but stop the attack of black here. Black is still winning, but it's going to be slightly harder to win. Instead, buckle up, because in this position, Charitharda was possessed by Magnus Carlsen or some other super grandmaster or some entity of chess, because he decided to go knight takes h3 anyway. Now, I don't know if Charitharda saw that there wasn't a pin from the rook anymore, but I suppose his idea was that after the pawn captures, which is of course the only move that really makes sense, this is a permanent pin on the king and this knight, and he thought, well, at the very least I can win back the knight with h5. But again, he found something better. And he decided that he was going to enter in a YouTube video some years later. So yes, you can play h5 and win the knight, but why do that when you can go for a forced checkmate here? Well, maybe not fully forced, but a very strong attack. Charitharda played his third brilliant move in this game. With knight takes d4. Another knight sacrifice. He just gave one up on h3. And he's giving up the other knight. But notice this. The bishop is opening up. And while this knight was not really participating in the attack, all of a sudden this bishop is. And, well, the immediate threat is that this knight is going to play this fork and win the queen. But after the pawn takes the knight, can you now see the knockout blow? The fourth and final brilliant move of this game. He sacrificed the rook. Rook takes g4. Fourth majestic, brilliant sacrifice. In total, we sacrificed a knight, another knight, and a rook, all in sequence. Because after the rook is captured, the queen is going to take this pawn, force the king to move, and deliver this checkmate with the help of the bishop from all over the other side of the board. How beautiful is that? So, according to the engine, Charithartha played this game like an 1800, so 800 points above his actual rating. And I have to say, this sequence is Grandmaster worthy. He told me that he was very focused on this bishop looking down at the king's side and the rook and queen possibly entering the attack. So that's why he wanted to shred the king open and open up the bishop, and that's how he found knight takes h3 and knight takes d4. Because who cares about 3 pieces when you only need 2 to deliver checkmate? Wow, beautiful game. Now, I am considering doing this a little bit more, going over your most brilliant sequences. So if you have a majestic game, a beautiful sequence, it doesn't have to be a perfect game, but just maybe some very, very impressive moves that you played and you're very proud of and you want to share with the world, feel free to send them to me on Instagram. You can look for Checkmate Pietro, same name that I have here on YouTube, and send me your games there on DMs. And you might be in the next video. In the meantime, I thank you very much for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, if you like chess, if you love impressive, spectacular sequences, leave a follow, and I will see you on the next video.